relatives, none of my family friends. I just kind of happened when I was watching TV. I was watching the famous Don Quixote video with Mikhail Baryshnikov and Cynthia Harvey, which was like a very famous video back in the 90s. I was watching it on TV when I was about 3, and then I was like, yes, I want to be a ballet dancer. And for 6 months, I asked my mom to go to the ballet school until she finally was like, okay. Yeah, my mom actually was really good because obviously there's a lot of private schools around. She selected this ballet school which had a RID training, Royal Academy of Dance, simply because my mom didn't know anything about ballet, but it's because the RID offers you like a certificate every year. It's almost like it's much more structured. So my mom thought like, okay, every year he's gonna do exams and he's gonna have a piece of paper. So she thought that ballet school was the right ballet school to start. I started at 4. Because back when I was 3, they wouldn't allow me in. So after annoying my mom for 6 months, she then started looking for the school, and I was just about to turn 4, and they were like, let's just wait until he turns 4, then he can join. So I had to wait another 3 or 4 months. It's just when you start that young, you don't do that much. I would be doing twice a week, 3 times a week. But the RID actually has a program for that age group as well. So you start to do little skips and little musicality games and all things like that. That helps with then the development for later studies in dance. I didn't even question it. I didn't really want to do anything else. Of course, I did many other things at the same time. There was a time in my childhood where I was doing basketball, karate, piano, swimming, tap, and ballet at the same time because I just had I was a bundle of energy. But ballet has always been no doubt. I never got bored of it, ever. It is weird that someone at 3 years old is so convinced about it, and my parents let me do it because they saw how convinced I was. They had no idea what it was. In fact, you can imagine my dad, he was like ballet, obviously he was steeped in stereotype, so for people that didn't know at all what it was, my parents were a bit but they just saw me so convinced, and I never was so dedicated, so I would go. And then in fact, I kept increasing the weekly classes. So by the time I was 6, 7, I was already doing 5, 6 times a week, which is quite a lot for that age. And then by the time I was 11, 12, 13, I was doing every day. After discussing it with my teachers at the time, I live about an hour and 15 minutes from Milan, drive. So we thought, well, we have the most renowned ballet school in Italy right there. So I went to audition, which wasn't easy. And I never realized what level that was. I think I was a big fish in a small bowl when I was in a little private school. There were only 5 boys, and I didn't have any idea what the level was. And then at 11, I went to Milan. And my mom applied for it together with my teacher because it's something that they had to discuss together. And then I just remember finding myself in the medical examinations. It's a little bit like they do in a lot of ballet schools, especially, for example, in Russia. They measure your proportions, they measure flexibility. They need to check if you have scoliosis, if you have flat feet, if you have any physical issues. And actually, I have flat feet, and we were aware that I had flat feet. So I remember being petrified because I've passed all the tests, And then there was one last test. It was just a medical test where they check for scoliosis, they check for everything. And I knew I had flat feet. So that when you then go to a platform to check if you had flat feet, I purposely kept them up so that I wouldn't show them that I had flat feet, because I was so afraid that maybe they were going to say like, almost, but you got flat feet. Like in La Scala, when you start, you have to do academics in the morning and then school in the afternoon. So for the first 5 years, actually for the first 3 years, I did academics, so from 8 in the morning until about 1 p.m. and then ballet from 2 p.m. until 6 or something. It was our own academic school, so it's only for the La Scala Ballet School students. The ballet training at La Scala at the time, but even now actually, was very much Russian based. So the director of the school at the time and all the teachers were part of a program that back in the 80s had it was called like a twin partnership with Bolshoi Theater. So the Bolshoi Theater singers would come to Milan to sing, to learn how to sing, and ballet dancers, Italian ballet dancers, would go to the Bolshoi Ballet School to train. So all my teachers all graduated from Bolshoi back in the 80s, which wasn't like, it was like unheard of at the time to have like foreigners like in the Bolshoi Ballet School. So the training was very much Russian. So even though most of the teachers were Italian, like 4 of the teachers were Italian, 2 Russians, they all spoke Russian. And they all almost like, they would talk to us in Italian, but the training was very Russian. The very old like 18th century Italian technique that was refined by Zucchetti, that kind of got lost because more national academies and more national companies were then led by Russian trained dancers or actual Russian directors or teachers. So slowly, the majority of our Italian academic schools like are very much Russian, like tilting towards Russian style. So like we do have like a very big Cuban school, for example, in Turin, but for example, the school in Naples, in Rome, in Milan, they're all Russian based. Milan more so than the others, but they're all more or less Russian based. That's why Italian dancers are all, tall, skinny, flexible. I was in La Scala for 5 years, and I mean, but those were kind of one of the most important 5 years, because it was from the age of 11 until when I just turned 16. And it was, first of all, it was completely different way of training for me. So they had to basically rebuild my posture and rebuild my body completely while I was growing up as well, like while I was going through puberty. So it was very strict. It was very hard work, but it suited me. Like I respond well to sort of like strict authoritarian, like training. So that was kind of how it was at the time. I remember like dancing when I was 11 with Roberto Bolle or Massimo Muro or even Joel Carreño when he came to guest. So also the relationship between the company and the school was quite close. Unfortunately, the buildings are not close. They're like 20 minutes apart. But so we wouldn't see the company daily, but we every 2-3 months will do some shows. We were also allowed to go and watch performances of the company, and I would go all the time because I was lucky. I lived like near the school and the theater, and also I sometimes like would try to squeeze and watch rehearsals, which that wasn't allowed, but I would try to squeeze myself into the theater and just watch rehearsals as well. Back when like there was a certain point that academics, then you do that in the evening. So whenever in the school, the Italian school system, eventually when you turn 14, you then swap, you go to high school. And then when you then go to high school, then in La Scala we would do ballet in the morning up until like 5:30, and then I would do school from 6:30 until 10:30 at night. So so swapped. So sometimes I would have like a couple of hours in the afternoon and I would just run and watch like rehearsal of something. And then, so by law, you have to do a certain amount of hours of academics a week. There is no escape. So which subject you do, it depends on which school you decide to, which school you decide to go to, but you have to do, that's why you have to do a minimum of 5 hours a day of academics until you're 19. So this rule changes by country. So in England, it's a lot easier. They have a lot less academic, or in France, or it's all different. In Italy, you have to do 5 hours. That's the reason why even later on I had to, do 6-7 hours of ballet, and then I had to do 5 hours a night together with like 50-year-old men, builders or plumbers, because they had to catch up on school, for example, that they missed out 10 years ago. And I was always the youngest in the night school. I did go to some operas, but I also was involved in some operas as well as a dancer, so I ended up watching operas. I think I was too young to like be able to go and see like comedy, or to go and see like a play, or to go and see like a commedia dell'arte. All these things are things that I started to get into a little bit later when I was in London. So there was so much going on, but I was only focusing on ballet. I didn't have that much time as well, because I would do all day ballet, or all night school. All day ballet, all night school. I had 2 days, and in those 2 days I was still I wasn't old enough to go by myself in certain places, and so I missed out on that. But I caught up later on. At the time, there was a lot of academic training, but very little performing, and we weren't allowed to go to ballet competitions either. So I kept seeing everybody else around the world that they can go to Prix de Lausanne, they can go to Varna, they would go to Jackson competition, and La Scala ballet students would never go to any of that. So that was already a first sign that I was like, I kind of want to experience that. But also what was frustrating for me is that we had one show a year. That's it. There was no other little performances. There was one show a year. So if you didn't do anything good in that show, or depending on what repertoire you weren't casting anything good, that was your only chance to perform. And so by the time I was like 15, that was becoming frustrating for me. So what happened that made me do the jump was this amazing gala performance that we had at the Arcimboldi Theatre in Milan, which we were celebrating the 190th anniversary of the Scala Ballet School. And as part of this anniversary, we had 2 gala performances where Paris Opera Ballet School, Bolshoi Ballet School, Mariinsky, Hamburg, I think, and Royal Ballet School and the La Scala Ballet School were performing one piece each in the first half, and in the second half, principals from each of those companies would do like a pas de deux. So it was an amazing gala, and I was 15. At the last minute, they made me do this. I had to jump in and do something like a soloist part in what we were doing for the evening. And I remember watching all these amazing dancers. In fact, at the time, Natalia Osipova was there representing the Bolshoi Ballet. And because she's only 2 years older than me, so she was there, and there was another amazing dancers from Mariinsky. And I remember there were these 2 dancers from the Royal Ballet School. I actually remember one was Corey Stern, who is now at ABT, and the other one is, I don't remember her name now, but it's this Thai dancer, beautiful dancer. And I remember we were watching, even after my rehearsal was finished, I would stay in the theater and watch everybody's rehearsals and everybody's classes. And my teacher once just like sat down with all of our students, and we were watching the Royal Ballet School perform Concerto pas de deux. And he said it as a little comment, but like it was like what made me just go, because he just looked at them and he was like, see how effortless they are, and how everything is there academically. They're clean, they're pure, it's all there, but there is no effort. So then you can focus on the expressive quality of it. And that's when I was like, but then I have to go to Royal Ballet School then, because that was exactly what I needed as a dancer. I've always been really energetic and really, so I always knew that I had to work on that. And he just basically pointed me towards the Royal Ballet School. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go yet. So that was it. That's when I was like, I'm gonna have to leave now. I didn't have any connections to London, like I didn't know anyone in London. So I just had to go through the process of applying for the open audition. And I was, I sent the video, I sent everything, and I was accepted to the open audition. So I came to London, and I did the open audition with loads of people who are now like some of my best friends, and
To the upper school.
yes, to the Royal Ballet Opera School. So because I was 15, I was about to turn 16, and when I turned 16, I actually then came to the Royal Ballet School. I came to the open auditions, and kind of a similar process to like how we did a ballet class, and then we kind of were doing stretching. They were just checking if we're flexible or checking, physical attributes and we had the medical examinations and all that, and then to my surprise, I got in. I got accepted. I really didn't think, because it was such a long shot for me. It was like, yeah, right, I'm gonna get into the Royal Ballet School. I was like, I'll give it a go. But I spoke a little bit of English because for the past 2 summers before that, I went to the summer course in New York at the School of American Ballet. In fact, because I've already done the summer course at the School of American Ballet, I was thinking about maybe going to the School of American Ballet to finish my studies. So at first, the Royal Ballet School wasn't really in my mind until my teacher said that. So I did speak a little bit of English, but it was American accent. So when I did eventually come to the Royal Ballet School, I was made fun of a little bit for that. Yeah, so how it works at the Royal Ballet School is completely different from how it works in La Scala and how it works in Italy, actually. So we were doing ballet in the morning, and then we would do like 2-3 hours of academics in the middle of the day, sort of like after lunchtime, and then we carry on with ballet for the rest of the day. So it gave us a lot more time to like squeeze in like repertoire, pas de deux, variations, all things that in La Scala I wasn't able to do yet because there wasn't enough time. So that's actually one thing I remember that was very different for me was, well, of course the training, but actually the pas de deux. Like, in La Scala at the time, there was like, they would not let you start pas de deux until you were 16, 17. Whether I almost felt like I was behind. So there was a lot of work to do, and they would do a lot of pas de deux, and we would do a lot of repertoire. And in the 3 years I went to the Royal Ballet School, I ended up doing 8 competitions because I was so eager to just do as much as I could, because that's what I was there for. So I went, my very first ballet competitions was in Tanz Olymp in Berlin. So I went there when I just arrived, so at 16 straight away. And again, an amazing experience. Like, because not that like I was arrogant or anything, but I think I just got offered the Royal Ballet School. So there was a moment where I thought, oh, maybe I am good, like I was getting quite confident, and I was like, oh, I'm good. And I went to the competition, complete slap in the face, because there was unbelievable dancers there. And I remember this day, the guy that won the competition at the time was called Jerlin Dudy, this Ukrainian dancer, who was just phenomenal. And I remember coming in like, again, not arrogant, but quite confident. And I remember watching him doing a variation, and I was just like, I have so much to learn still. I was like, there's so much more work to do. That gave me, like, as soon as I came back from the competition, I got 3rd place, I remember, which was good, but that I completely forgot about that. It wasn't at all about the prize. It was like, I just realized how much better people are out there and how behind I was. There was so much to be done. So then I came back and I started to go 110 miles an hour. And then I went to the competition in Ukraine, where I got silver medal. Again, great experience. I think I had to do like 6 variations, 6 classical variations and a contemporary variations in a week. So I had to prepare like crazy. And so again, at the Royal Ballet School, they would prepare me for that, but also I had to spend a lot of my own time. I choreographed my own contemporary variation to go with, and it was just a complete different gear. Like, my first experience choreographing was at the Royal Ballet School, like when I was 16, so straight when I arrived, because at the Royal Ballet School we had, and we still have, the choreographic course, which then evolves into a yearly internal choreographic competition called the Ursula Moreton. And when I first arrived at the Royal Ballet School, There was an Italian person, friend of mine, that asked me, "Oh, I'm doing this choreography. Can you come and help me out? Can you come and see it and see me what you think?" And I remember watching it, and I was like, there were so many mistakes in there, or what I consider mistakes, and I was just like, I don't even know where to start. So I started thinking, well, if I can see the mistakes of others, maybe I can then make something, because I was like, I can see that's not wrong, that's not wrong, that's not wrong. So what is right? So I then applied for the year choreographic competition. The choreographic lessons have to be done, so it's part of the training. So you start small, so sometimes they ask you to create a 1 minute solo on yourself, or they just they don't really teach you how to choreograph. They just like tell you about certain choreographic processes, and they give you the time, the dancers, and the space. So you then end up choreographing on each other, in that hour or 2 hours a week of choreographic course. And obviously, if you then want to choreograph further, then you apply it for the choreographic competition. So we all had to do it. It's just most people realize that they don't want to and they're not any good. And I was like, okay, let me try. I hands down, no idea that I could do anything. So I started choreographing. I made this piece for 10 dancers, and I applied for the competition. And to my complete surprise, I didn't even apply to win. I applied so that they would give me the dancers and the time to create. And then, to my complete surprise, I won the competition. Ahead of people that were choreographing for already 2 or 3 years. So then I was like, oh, okay. Then I was like, maybe I can choreograph something. So after that, I started to choreograph contemporary solos for me, for competitions, for me, and for other dancers in the school that were going to competitions, and they needed a contemporary solo. So I started slowly to choreograph the contemporary solos. By that point, by the age of 11 until pretty much until now, I've started to become obsessed with dance. So not just ballet, but I would watch any video I could get my hands on. So I would study every choreographer, the big ones at the time, Killian, Forsyth, Nacho Duato, like all the big ones of the day, whether it's contemporary or classical. I remember like going deep on Prejocage, and it was just so advanced for me at the time. So I've always knew of the contemporary world. I just never really danced it, and I never choreographed for it. But the reason why I started to choreograph it can't really be considered contemporary when you do a contemporary solo for a competition, it always ends up being like a showcase of your own abilities more than like a different style of dancing. But I remember my friends would be like, I have this piece of music I want to choreograph to, and it was usually like a pretty like modern music, like it wouldn't even be classical music at all. And I would just listen to music, and I would just automatically create. So it wasn't that I was focusing on the style of the dancing. I was focusing on the music, and the music would then give a slightly more modern feel for the movement. The upper school is a 3-year period. So at the end of the 3 years period, we are all hunting for jobs. So that's kind of the graduating year is very much focused on finding a job. So I remember in the 3rd year, I would be starting to work with the Royal Ballet Company on like little productions. So they start to give you a little work experience through the ballet company, but also the whole year is very much focused on how to create a CV, where to audition, I don't know, looking at when to audition, how to audition, what's good or bad in an open audition or in a private audition. So throughout the year, I think I did like 5 or 6 auditions around Europe mainly, because America obviously was a bit hard to reach. The second time I went to the Youth American Grand Prix, I was offered a contract for Houston Ballet, actually. But I did feel that wasn't the right time to go professional, because when I joined the Royal Ballet School, I've had like probably one of them, my biggest injury, and I had to have an operation. So I was off for most of the year. And then at the end of the year, I did the last 2 months, and somehow I graduated still. So by when I then was supposed to graduate, I only did like a year and a half, and I felt I needed more training. I wanted more training. So even after I got offered that contract, I was like, I don't. That's not the right time to either go professional or fly all the way to Houston, that I didn't really know much about. So I've decided to stay an extra year so that I could do the full 3 years of training. And that was actually one of the best decisions I made, because that allowed me to do the Gene ballet competition, which I won. And through that also to get my name out a little bit more. And also, like, at the time, obviously, like all of us, we were all focused on the Royal Ballet Company. We all wanted to join the Royal Ballet Company. But when it was made clear that I wasn't going to make the cut that time for the Royal Ballet Company, then I had to start looking. So the competition did help in terms of exposure, because then directors do come to ballet competitions. But it was just a timing thing. I just got a contract in a time where I wasn't really looking for one. And then when I was looking for one, I had to actually audition for it. I auditioned in Berlin, I auditioned in Vienna, I auditioned in Zurich, I auditioned in Hamburg, I auditioned in Toulouse. Yes. And then I got the contract in Zurich Ballet, which was not, I didn't really know the company at the time, but it was a really good contract, and the school always pushes you to take contracts because they want all the graduates to be employed. So so at the end of the graduation, I had my contract with Zurich Ballet, and we had the grand last show at the Royal Opera House back in 2007, where I thought I was never gonna see that stage again. So it was one of those like, go full out, this is it, like moment. And then I graduated, and I was shortly after, maybe 4 weeks after that, I started in Zurich. Age of 19, first professional experience, and it was a shocker for me, but in a positive way, because the company at the time was very, very well structured, very strict, so very hard work, and a lot of performances, a lot of different type of choreographies. The director was a choreographer himself, so we did a lot of new creations as well. So very intense and very fruitful 2 years. I created roles by the director. I've worked with some of the best choreographers in the world there. I've worked with Killian Forsyth, Nacho Duato, Matzek, and Mario Rigonzetti, and the director. So many choreographers. Yeah, that's what I was lucky, because I was, when I first went to Zurich, I was a little bit demoralized because I didn't get in the Royal Ballet Company, like most of us that weren't in the Royal Ballet Company. But actually, it's one of the best things you can do for yourself when you're young, is to go in a smaller company. Bigger companies are bigger, they have a lot more talent in the pool of talents that they have. The roles are not that many, so you end up waiting a long time. And that waiting time often makes you, you kind of lose, you don't progress anymore, you start to regress a little bit. So without me knowing it at the time, that was the best thing for me, because I went into a smaller company that needed me. So they didn't take you and kept you as an extra. They needed you. They needed you to dance. And I was part of a junior ballet company as well. So as a junior ballet, we would do our own little tours with our own little performances, where I would do leading roles straight away. And I was part of the main company as well, so I would do corps de ballet work, or I would just cover amazing new pieces, or even sometimes I ended up doing soloist roles in the main company. So it was just perfect for me. So then the progression from school to professional just kept going, but it's not obvious at all. Most graduates go to a ballet company and then it stagnates for 1-2 years, until maybe 3, until they then start to pick up again. And I was just lucky that development, that never stopped for me. So in fact, I think in Zurich Ballet, I've improved a hell of a lot in 2 seasons. Italy was never in my mind, unfortunately, because the way contracts worked and still work, it's too precarious. Like, you never know every year whether you're going to be, have a contract renewal next year. But it wasn't even about the contract at the time. For me, it was in Italy. It was always they were very traditional in the way the hierarchy of the company works. So I knew that there was no way I would be doing a soloist role for at least 5 years. So I was like, and that's just so, it's been so rigid, you know. Especially back then, it was really rigid. So you knew that you could join the company and just rot there for 5 years and doing nothing, and then just build resentment and just become a worse dancer. So I never really saw Italy as an option back then, unfortunately. So in Zurich Ballet, after 2 years, actually, I got promoted. I got promoted to soloist, but then, you know, there were certain things about how I slotted in the repertoire that I I wasn't happy about, because I just wanted to do more. I just always wanted to do more. I wanted to do everything, and it just so happened that when I got promoted, I was told, you have a month to let me know, because otherwise, like, I have to know. So I had a month where I had to reflect about it, because I loved Zurich Ballet, but there were a few things that I didn't understand at the time. Probably now I would have understood them and I wouldn't have taken such a drastic action. But at the time I was young and I was hot-headed, and I just was like, no. Royal Ballet was always on my mind, obviously, because when you graduate from the Royal Ballet School, you always have that at the back of your mind. And the truth is that I always saw myself in the Royal Ballet. Because I knew the company very well, and I always saw myself in there. I was like, I know I can fit there. And after my second year, when I slowly started thinking about leaving Zurich Ballet, I started sending my videos of various performances to the director of the Royal Ballet at the time, Monica Mason, as sort of saying, like, you know, like, I'm here, I'm making progress, I really want to come to the company still. But at the time, it was 2008, and it was a big financial crisis, and there was a lot going on. So I remember Monica telling me that unfortunately she appreciated my progress, but she was like, unfortunately, I don't have a contract, because I really don't have a contract. And I was kind of like, okay, of course I understood. And that kind of, I was like, okay, then I almost thought, like, well, then Royal is gone now. Like, I don't think she really liked me, you know. Then a friend of mine, who was a principal dancer in Norwegian National Ballet, called me in June. So up until almost the end of the season, I didn't have a contract. And he was like, just so you know, I'm about to resign next week. So if you want a contract, wait until I resign and straight away write to the director. And I was like, okay. So it kind of like came from the sky. So as soon as he told me, like, well, I resigned, I emailed the director, and he was like, oh, what a coincidence. I was like, we actually need a man right now. So I went to an audition there, and straight away got a contract. So like, it was very last minute. It was very like in middle of June. I went to audition. The season in Zurich finished at the end of June. So in 2 weeks, I just decided, okay, I'm going to Oslo. And I just sold everything I had in Zurich in my flat, and I just went. You start from the beginning, but you do enter a company with a previous experience. So they don't treat you like you're a graduate. Because in those 2 years in Zurich, I did dance quite a bit. And I joined Norwegian National Ballet, and I started really well straight away. I straight away started with my soloist roles, and then I had my first principal role in Norway, where I did Nutcracker Prince. First full-length ballet for me, first like big principal role. I remember I was also partnering a very experienced ballerina, and she's now a friend of mine, and so it was quite daunting. Now, on the day of my opening night of Nutcracker, so it was my first principal role, on that night, I received an email from Janetta Lawrence, who was the assistant director of the Royal Ballet, offering me a contract for the season after. So I joined Oslo in August, and on the 1st of December, I knew that I got offered the Royal Ballet Company. So I I was enjoying the season in Oslo up until then. It's just that this total surprise, and of course, I mean, as soon as I received the email, like, you don't say no to Royal Ballet. So, and also it's a company that I've always wanted to go back to, and I kept insisting. So I thought the director in June told me that there were no contract, and she meant it, and I thought she was never going to write to me again. But actually, she had me at the back of her mind, and as soon as a contract became available, I got it. I remember being super happy, but then I was thinking I need to keep it a secret because I don't want people to know yet. I don't want my director to know because I wanted to enjoy the season still. And unfortunately, the director knew the day after. So I had to speak to the director about it. And so from that moment on, he was like, well, now I know that you're going to be leaving us at the end of the season. There was no reason for him to push me. So then I still danced. I still danced a reasonable amount, but obviously not as much as I could have if I, decided to stay. But I still danced with amazing. I remember dancing with new creation from David Dawson. I danced for the first time Paul Lightfoot piece, which is a choreographer that I then completely fell in love with. And John Neumeier was the first time I worked with John Neumeier. So it was one season, but I did a lot, as much as I could in that season. Well, obviously, after 3 months, I was like, I couldn't wait anymore. I was like, so ready to come back. But it was a company that I knew, like I knew the people in it, I knew how it worked, and I was excited to join. I couldn't wait to join, and in fact, when I finally joined, probably one of my problems is that I was just so excited of being there that I was just like a kid in like Neverland. So I was just like excited about everything I would do, and it probably annoyed a few people. I was promoted to soloist in Zurich, and then I was doing a lot of soloist roles in Oslo, and principal roles. And then when I joined the Royal Ballet, I went straight back to corps de ballet. But the thing is that I wanted to be there so much, and I understood that the company was big, and then I had to work my way through, and I had to prove myself as well. So I understood the level of prestige that the Royal Ballet was, so I couldn't exactly demand, too much to start with until I proved myself. Like, I was determined to come in and just like do as much as, as well as I could to then prove myself to the company. So, but thinking back, I think the way my career started, my professional career started, was actually great because I've never stopped dancing a lot and progressing. So not having had that stale part of the career, which most graduates have straight after school, was a huge advantage. Because then I had experience. In 3 years away, I worked, in fact, I've calculated, I've worked with more choreographers in those 3 years away than I have 10 years in the Royal Ballet. Now, this is not a criticism at all. It's just because of the variety of seasons and the variety of cities that I've been to, I just ended up working with loads of people. So in 3 years, I collected much, much more experience than a person who graduated and joined the Royal Ballet, the Paris Opera, or American Ballet Theatre, where for 3 years they would have just done corps de ballet work in the great classics. So actually, it was great the way it happened. Even though at the time I was frustrated about it because I always wanted to be in the Royal Ballet. So. Yeah, so as far as choreography is concerned, after, I started to choreograph at the Royal Ballet School. Then those 3 years away, I wasn't able to choreograph almost at all because they didn't have like choreographic workshops for people like that young. I was actually about to make something in Oslo, but then as soon as they found out that I was leaving, there was no reason to push me as a choreographer because they knew I was going to leave. I was going to leave by the end of the season. So then when I came back to the Royal Ballet, another amazing thing about the company is that they have a yearly choreographic workshop where anyone can apply, no matter how little or how much experience you have, which was in the Limbury Theatre at the time. So my very first choreography, like proper choreography in the Royal Ballet, was in the Limbury Theatre, and it was a trio which I made for three friends of mine, of which one of them was Sergei Polunin, which at the time was a principal dancer, and it actually was successful enough to be picked up by the Royal Ballet School, and the Royal Ballet School performed it 2 years after that on the main stage. So then again, like the whole choreographic fire started to fuel, and I again I would dance flat out all day, and all the performances I had to do, and any free time, any weekend, I would just choreograph for that, and then little projects started to pop up here and there as well, thanks to the Royal Ballet Draftworks, which is the choreographic workshop. I was doing, I was, again, because I had so much experience joining the company, I didn't stay in the corps de ballet like a lot. In fact, I remember my first season was one of the best seasons that I've ever had. Like, I remember coming in, and they would put me to cover something, and it just so happened that every person I covered went off. So I've ended up doing soloist roles. I even did a principal role. I did Blue Boy in Patineur, my first season. Again, last minute. I didn't even have the hat that fit me, because they were never think I was gonna go on, but they just like, we need you to do the show today, and I was like, okay, So in my first season, I did a lot of soloist roles. So I was very much like a dancer, but because of this other program, and because you did have a time and the dancers to experiment on choreography, I then also started my choreographic development, and you could say, yeah, that's when I became dancer and choreographer. August 2020 will be my 10 years in the company. So many memorable performances in the while performing with the Royal Ballet, also because we perform all around the world. If I go in order, and I think the best metric for this is the ones that really jump into mind, because obviously those are the ones that are impressed in my memory the most. I definitely have to say, it was probably 4 months after I joined the company was the show I did, Blue Boy in Patineur. So that was it was a big deal for me at the time. And then obviously, sort of, I think the show that really put me on the map in terms of like, oh, this guy is coming up from the corps de ballet, was Puck in Frederick Ashton's Midsummer Night Dream. I think that was a role, and I remember just that first opening night performance was just, it was one of the most memorable performances that I can remember. Then there were some personal ones, like the first time I danced Lenski in Onegin, which was a ballet that I have adored for so many years, and just being able to move on that music was just everything for me. So I remember that doing that performance was also very memorable for me. The first time I did Mercutio as well, very memorable performance, and it's a role that I've kept building, and I'm still performing, and which I love, definitely. And then I have to say, there's like a little backstory to this. Like the first time I danced Rhapsody by Frederick Ashton was at the Royal Opera House, and it's a piece that I've adored for so many years, and I've remember watching it repeatedly when I was in school. So already the fact that I was doing that was incredible. So when I did it at the Royal Opera House, it felt like a milestone. But then one of the most memorable performances in my career so far was doing Rhapsody in the Bolshoi Theatre, and that was something else. It was because I was very aware of how demanding the audience can be in those settings, like the prestige of this theatre. So the weight of that theatre, plus the difficulty of that role, the technical difficulty. No rake. No, thankfully they've managed to flatten it out for us. But I just remember before the curtain went up, it was a level of nerves that I never reached. So I've always tried to keep my nerves at bay, because they usually ruin your performance. But I remember that day, it was almost paralyzing. Like I wasn't like nervous and anxious. I was just frozen. Just the idea that I had to do all of that in this huge stage in front of these people, and like this amazing ballet, and there's so much technical stuff that can go wrong there. So that was definitely a big performance for me. Even talking about it now, I get scared. But that was definitely another milestone. And then of course there was, you know, my debut in Film Algarde. That of course was also like a big deal for me. And then I think most recently, as part of like some of my guestings, it was dancing in Verona, where a new production of Romeo and Juliet by Johann Coburg was created, and so he created the role of Mercutio on me. Again, a role that I performed many times, and you know, I kind of embraced, you know, personally. And we performed in front of 13,000 people, you know, open air in one of the most iconic theaters in the world. As far as Italy is concerned, I don't think most Italians know who I am. I think, but it's not at all their fault. I haven't performed in Italy as much as I would have liked. There has been a few opportunities for me to guest in a few companies, but it always fell through because of like organizations or timing. Because also I am a full-time member of the company here, plus a choreographer, so my time is like constantly taken over by projects. And I have tried, but this show was last year, and I think again this show came about, and suddenly people were like, oh, there is this Italian guy from the Royal Ballet that is there. So that kind of gave me quite a bit of exposure. I love performing in Italy. I love the Italian audience. They are so warm and focused as a ballet audience. And I'll definitely like to perform more there. So there was electricity, I remember, in the theater, and I could feel the affection, even though I wasn't the leading role that night. I just could feel the affection towards me because I was the only Italian person in the cast. And it's Verona. It was incredible venue. Like, I can't speak more highly of it. I have to say, as far as my parents are concerned, I was so lucky because they have supported me always, even not knowing what my world was at all, because they could see that I was I was really being dedicated to it. It was making me happy, and that's what I wanted to do. So I had the fortune of had really supportive parents. So they never looked at ballet in a derogatory way. They just never really knew what ballet was when I wanted to start. So I slowly had to educate them. And, of course, they've seen a lot more ballet since I started, but I could still see the sheer pride that they have of me. So whatever I was going to do, they were going to be supportive. So right now, my parents are amazing. They've supported me all throughout this. And I didn't realize how lucky I was until I saw how other people's parents behaved about ballet or supporting their children in doing a career which can be, that has a lot of question mark, and very, very few people make it to a professional level, and even fewer people make it to like a higher level. So it's always been it's a tough decision for parents to make, but my parents were just focused on how dedicated I was.